Hey, what's happening, Jet fans? Welcome to Jets Talk Now. I'm Paul Fiore. Thanks for joining me. Wanted to get on today. We had some news earlier in the day. Jets hiring a defensive coordinator. Brian Duker from Miami, the Dolphins secondary coach, pass game coordinator, defensive pass game coordinator. 36 years old, relatively unknown. A candidate that I believe had his first interview yesterday via Zoom. Now, Brian Glenn, Aaron Glenn knows him. They were on the same staff, so there's a familiarity there. But it is an interesting thing where the Jets, had 8 candidates for the job, announced all 8. The assumption that was Wink was going to be the DC. Then there was some crazy reporting around all of it, which is very difficult to make sense of. I have my own personal opinions. Others are going to have different views of this. I'll kind of break down what I see and what I think. And yesterday, amongst the chaos of Tanner Engstrand and the Jets mutually parting ways, which I think really was more related to Tanner just deciding he didn't want to be part of being an OC in name only and not actually have play calling. My guess is his agent called around. They probably have other opportunities for him to pursue and decided to leave. Amidst the report that the Jets reached out to John Gruden to see if he'd be interested in joining the staff. And earlier today, the Dallas Cowboys tight end coach was interviewed for the OC role. So we've got a lot of swirl here in the last 24 hours. And it's, as a fan of this team through everything, and, probably as a kid, you're just not as aware. But I'm thinking back to the last 15 years of dysfunction. I don't think I can recall a time where it has been this chaotic. And I'm not going to put all that on Aaron Glenn. I'm sure some people will. Your anti-Glenn people are going to just have a field day with this period of time. I was beside myself yesterday. I'm probably as upset and frustrated as I've ever been with this team, just because it's this pylon. But it's hard to know who's at fault for this stuff. I mean, again, I always believe it starts top down, right? You're only as good as the head of the organization. The head of the snake is a complete buffoon. I've said it multiple times. He's not done anything that would make me change my mind or feel differently. It's only amplified, actually, more recently now. But, this decision is clearly one that means Aaron Glenn is going to be the play caller on defense, and Duker, who he has familiarity with and comfort with, will help. Game plan will help, philosophy and scheme, but he's going to be, no differently than any team like Sean McVay, who calls the plays on offense, right? So on its face, if the Jets were going to do this, I have actually no issue with it, right? Like, my frustration lies in how we got here and how it feels like the Jets are just kind of winging it. And one of two things, or maybe a combination of things, are happening, but it's none of them are good. So your season ends. Wilkes had been fired for multiple weeks already. You went into the offseason. You had your offseason press conference. You talked about wanting to have a coaching staff that was in the same mindset as you. Cool. Now you interview 8 people virtually. Not all of them had a second interview. And during that process, it was intimated that these guys were interviewing to be the play caller as DC. Somewhere between the end of the year and, I guess, Saturday, when Wayne came in for interview number 2, Glenn started to communicate that he wanted to call the plays. What's hard about this from a fact-finding mission, if you're trying to connect the dots, Aaron Glenn came here with the intent to be the CEO coach. He fired Wilkes. He did not take over play calling then. He put Chris Harris in the role. He helped Chris Harris. He never took over play calling. Multiple times during the season, he was asked about wanting to take over play calling. He declined to want to take over play calling. For him to now say he wants to be the play caller, it's either Glenn had a change of heart through this interview process and decided the only way to move forward is if I make the decisions and call the plays in game, or Woody came down from the top rope and said, you're not spending the money for a Wink Martindale who you like as DC and replace the OC, because I'm paying you X amount of dollars. I'm paying now 2 fired coordinators and multiple assistants, guaranteed money probably for the next 2 years. If I hire Wink, he's going to want a 3-year deal. It's going to be, I don't know, $4 million, $5 million a year. If we bring in someone like Frank Reich, it's going to be similar. And Woody might have just been like, I'm not doing it. Now, again, both of those things actually are understandable to some extent, right? Like if you're Woody Johnson, and again, buffoon, you go, look, I don't want to keep spending millions and millions of dollars on somebody that I'm not feeling great about. My argument would be, well, then you should fire him if that's the way you feel. No different than after year 3 with Robert Saleh, it was reported he had lost faith and trust in him, and he didn't allow him to make any coaching changes. I've said this multiple times before. And what did he do? He fired him 5 games into the season. I feel like we're repeating the Robert Saleh time, except in year 2 versus year 4 with Glenn. If you have no faith and trust in the head coach, you don't just let him sit in the job to do what it's doing right now, which is floundering, being made fun of, being blamed for every decision. Some of it might be fair, some of it might not be fair. We all just can speculate. And again, if you're an anti-Glenner, this is like your panacea. You're losing. You're loving the chaos. If you're a pro-Glenn person, you're struggling and just blaming it all on Woody. And I've said very much over and over again, I'm not an anti-Glenn guy. I'm frustrated with Aaron Glenn. I'm frustrated with Woody Johnson. Frustrated with the organization. I'm pissed off. This is just bad in general. It makes the organization look really, really bad. So what do I think happened? I think it's more likely number 2 than number 1. I don't think Aaron Glenn had this sudden change of heart 3.5 weeks after the season's over, flies Wink Martindale in, who everyone knows has been a DC for ages, would never agree to not be the play caller, and then get flipped on its head suddenly on a Saturday where he says, hey, surprise, I want to call the plays. I don't believe that. I don't believe that, because now all of a sudden after Saturday happens, we add a guy on through a virtual interview yesterday who then gets named the DC today. Like that process just sped up rapidly with some brand new person. And it has to be because from the top, Woody was like, yeah, I'm not doing it. Like, I'm paying you a boatload of money. You have a defensive background. You choose. You want the DC, then you don't get the OC. You want the OC, you don't get the DC, but you're not getting both. That's my reasonable take and belief on it. I could be wrong, and it could be Glenn who just said, I'm going to do this last minute pivot. It feels weird to me. And I know people think he's got this personality that might lead you believe he would do these things. I don't think he does that. I don't. He's been talking to Wink since December. Like, do you think that literally 45 days after having all these conversations, he's just going to pull the rug up from under him? It has to be from the top. And I don't blame Woody, except that Woody should have been clear about this at the end of the season, so we didn't do all of this stupidity, and you just would have landed on Glenn calling plays 2 weeks ago without this chaos. Like he could have said, at the end of the season in his postseason press conference, we're going to look at different situations. There's a possibility I'm going to call my own plays. We're looking at that. But that was never intimated. And so we wound up with this, and, reporters reporting all kinds of stuff and all kinds of names. And it's this circus, and whether we feel Aaron Glenn is the center of the circus causing it or Woody's causing it, it doesn't matter, because broadly within the NFL, players, coaching candidates, all of these people, the media, they laugh at us. So it's just silly and embarrassing. And so now you get Brian Duker, who might be a good coach. I don't know anything about him. Looks like the sacrificial lamb who comes to the slaughter to take the job that no one else would take. That's what it looks like, right? He just looks like, here's the guy. It's like going to war back in the old days, and you had the guys that marched in the front lines, and we knew those guys were just literally just being sent to slaughter. It feels like Brian Duker, 36-year-old guy. He had no other DC opportunities. If it blows up, whatever. I pray it's not that, but that's what it feels like. It feels like Glenn can just mold him to do what he wants him to do. They have similar philosophies on the scheme and maybe the aggressiveness with which how they go about their, what they do with the philosophy. All that's fine, well and good. And you really hope and pray that Glenn takes over play calling and the team improves. You could have got here 3 weeks ago without all of the nonsense. That's just the reality of it. So that's the DC scenario. Now on OC, you have widely reported that Frank Reich seems to be the leader in the clubhouse. Now, with the Jets, Wink Martindale was a leader in the clubhouse until he wasn't. Until someone signs on the dotted line and there's an announcement, you cannot assume anything. So I am not going to assume it's Frank Reich. I'm going to say a senior voice will be the offensive coordinator. I think they'll spend a little bit of money to bring in someone with a resume. Probably not someone who's highly touted. They're not going to get Cliff Kingsbury. I see people like, why don't they go after Cliff Kingsbury? Why don't they go after this guy? Why don't they go after the OC from Denver who just got fired? Who he wasn't calling plays, right? That's Sean Payton. You got to see who's going to want the job right now. Does Frank Reich still want the job after what just transpired over the last day? I don't know. I also struggle believing Frank Reich will take this job without having a clear path to a quarterback. That's what he's kind of known for, is a guy that is good with QBs. He knows how to help them develop. He knows how to get the most out of them in general, especially if they're pocket passers, relatively taller guys. Carson Wentz, kind of the non-athletic, let's not say non-athletic, but the more pocket presence type QB. He had Bryce Young and it was a disaster, right? So Jacoby Brissett was a good fit for him. So what do they do like now? They interview this Dallas tight ends coach. Is that to fill the Rooney Rule requirements? I have no idea. If you were reading tea leaves and you wanted to believe Frank Reich was definitely going to be the OC, then you would say, yeah, they already have a handshake agreement with Reich. They, weren't going to make him the OC, but because Tanner wanted to leave, now they have to. They have to go through this process, which the Rooney Rule in general is a sham. People, doing this to potentially very qualified candidates is unfair, right? Like, I don't know anything about Dallas tight end coach, but no different than I kind of torched New England last year for how they handled Vrabel with their Rooney Rule requirements. This just stinks if that's what it is. I hope it's not. I hope he's actually interviewing for the job. Truthfully, I really do. I'd rather them actually go with someone unproven. Like, you got Glenn running the defense, go get another OC. Now, they had Tanner Engstrand, who's that guy, but if you're going to just bring somebody else in. But let's just assume they bring in a senior guy. I struggle believing the Jets aren't going to take some swing at quarterback. I keep saying this, and until maybe we see the plan, it's going to be in my gut, my feeling. I have no idea what that swing is. A lot of people are like, well, it'll be Ty Simpson, or it'll be Chambliss if he comes out. It'll be Nussmeier, right? They'll move back into the third round to get Nussmeier because they don't have a third round pick. It'll be a trade for somebody that maybe we're not thinking about. It's Mendoza, right? That's I've been intimating that I think Mendoza will be somebody they try and get. It's likely that the Raiders won't do it, but I just don't see a world where they make this type of hire without an actual quarterback in mind that they've agreed that they are going to pursue heavily. So, and you have a regime on the hot seat. You have an owner who's taken it on the chin over and over again right now, where the laughing stock, something's going to happen. I don't know what. Every day's a new day. Every day's crazy. The only other team that potentially is even close to as embarrassing as us is the Browns and their situation with Jim Schwartz now. But I'm obviously a lot calmer today, more level-headed about things. I think it's fine that Aaron Glenn's going to call his own plays. I think it's what it should have been at the end of the season if you weren't going to bring in Jim Leonard, someone of that ilk. I just wish the 3.5 weeks to get to this point and all of the chaos and all of the ridiculousness didn't happen. And you can sit here and say that chaos was caused by media. You could say the Jets didn't say anything, so whatever. But just take the goggles off for a second and understand why it's chaos. The season ended 3.5 weeks ago. The coaches didn't get fired until this past Friday. That's not normal. The OC didn't get fired or agreed to leave until yesterday. That's not normal. The DC search began as a normal process with 8 legitimate interviews. And we flew in someone for a second interview and pivoted on that day to have him be told he wouldn't be calling plays. That's not normal. Wink Martindale doesn't fly to Florham Park if he knew going to that meeting there was a chance Glenn wanted to call the plays. So you can say the Jets didn't talk about these things to the media, and they didn't, but everything that occurred is real. They did interview 8 people. They did have Wink Martindale in for a second interview. They did pivot to now Glenn calling the plays. This all did happen very late in a process. We are now trying to pivot away from our former offensive coordinator to a new one. We do have multiple openings on both sides of the ball on the coaching staff in the middle of Senior Bowl week. We did call John Gruden, confirmed, which is wild on its face just in general. Whether you believe Woody called him or, Craig Carton today said that Glenn himself called him. I don't know what's true, but they called him. I mean, they probably called Greg Roman too while they're at it. They're going to call these types of guys. These are the people they're calling. John Morton, is he getting phone calls? Just if you operate as a normal organization at the end of the season, you have a Black Monday, you fire all the people that need to be fired, you begin your process, you're very clear about your process, and it looks like you have a plan. Right now, it just looks like we're just winging it. And 2026 is likely going to be a really, really bad year, a really, really bad year. I hope I'm wrong. Glenn is the absolute ultimate underdog story at this point in life. He is Rocky Balboa against Apollo Creed. He's Rocky Balboa against Ivan Drago. He is fighting the biggest uphill battle you will ever see from a head coach going into his second season with this much turnover, turmoil, fan discourse. And if he turns it around, man, I will be happy as hell for the dude. Because that means as a fan, we have a winning team. And you know what? No matter what you feel about Aaron Glenn, I can promise you that this man is probably not sleeping at night right now. He is probably dealing with a whole bunch of crap. And he's a Jet at heart, and this probably burns his ass. So I do feel bad for the guy. Did he come in here the wrong way? Did he say the wrong thing? Yes. But he's a human being with a family who's getting shredded every day in the news. That's not cool. It's not. So I'm going to try to be a little easier on the guy and root for him. I'm still going to be critical, obviously, but this is just sucks, man. It sucks as a fan. This is where we are. So anyway, those are my thoughts on today. Congratulations to Brian Duker, the new defensive coordinator for the New York Jets. Godspeed, Duker. I hope it goes well for you. And when we know who the OC is, you know, and this is one of those things where you could find out tonight who the new OC is. So I'll jump back on and we can talk more about that. Anyway, guys, have a great day. Talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in. Please click like and subscribe. Appreciate you.